represents their views and their views only, and do not necessarily represent views of the Black Talk Media Project or the Black Talk Radio Network. Good evening. You are tuned in to Black Talk Radio News. It is a Tuesday night. It is August the 29th, 2017. Of course, it's been a while since I've been on the airways for this particular program. Of course, I've been broadcasting on New Abolitionist Radio, especially after coming back from our historic trip, which was about maybe 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, on August the 19th, the Millions for Prisoners Human Rights March, which got the t-shirt on. I was there when that occurred, when that abolitionist history was made. But I canceled the program BTR News, which we moved to a new time, which is Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. And actually, I wouldn't call it BTR News, but I have actually expanded the programming to 5 days a week. We don't really have a lot of afternoon or morning programming. We've had some shows in those slots, but those shows are no longer on air. So I'm bringing back the BTR music mix, the afternoon music mix that actually started yesterday from noon to 2 o'clock p.m. Monday through Friday. So definitely start checking that out on Black Talk Radio, your premier Black digital radio station for new Black media for this new millennium. I am excited about being back on the program with our special guest. I have been following this guy for some time online. He's been a guest on Black Talk Radio over the years. Daryle Lamont Jenkins. He'll be joining us later today. Daryle Lamont Jenkins will be coming on to educate us on how the Black community should view the Antifa Movement, and that stands for anti-fascist movement, which we have been seeing a lot in the mainstream media in their responses to white terrorism, white supremacist-based terrorism, whether it's the neo-confederates, whether it is the KKK, neo-Nazis, whatever label they're going under. These are terrorist organizations, always have been, but unfortunately, the U.S. federal government throughout its sorry history has often failed to treat these people like terrorists, except for Ulysses S. Grant. President Grant, who was a former Union Army general, did treat them like terrorists. He was armed with the Klan Act of 1871, and he used it to prosecute them like the terrorists that they are. But especially when you move up to about 1915 with Woody Wilson, that's President Woodrow Wilson, when he screened that film Birth of a Nation in the White House, which I just went to. We had the rally in Lafayette Park right across the street from the White House. Of course, we went over there to shoot some video as well as the Lincoln Memorial. Hope y'all like the video we uploaded to our YouTube channel of abolitionists at the Lincoln Memorial to point out that the 13th Amendment never abolished slavery. But the Antifa movement has sprang up in the vacuum of law enforcement, whether we're talking about state law enforcement, whether we're talking about county, city, but definitely when we're talking about federal law enforcement, they have left a vacuum in the security of Americans here in the continental United States of America, probably in their territories, occupied territories as well, like Hawaii, like Guam, like Puerto Rico, and what have you. But they are definitely letting these terrorists who subscribe to the religion of white supremacy run wild out there in the streets. And they've been doing it for some time. So it's not like I'm breaking news to you and showing you how white people in a racist system such as we have here in the United States are allowed to just practice terrorism against non-white people or against those they declare others, whether that's because of sexual orientation. But they pretty much have had a license to terrorize black people again, going all the way back, especially to Woodrow Wilson. So we're dealing with the descendants of a very evil people who have handed down a very evil ideology. And the only people that's doing anything about it, that it seems that it's opposing these terrorists in the streets, aren't the police, but it is these anarchists. It's these alternative groups, the mainstream media, and those in the alt-right movement have been trying to call them the alt-left. Y'all know I'm not real big into labels, but you know, sometimes we do have to use them, but trying to describe them as the ones who are terrorists. And I just, quite frankly, don't see it that way. You know, in earlier broadcasts, I have commended those who were battling those terrorists in the streets in Charlottesville. A lot of that did not make the mainstream corporate news media. I actually did not see much footage uploaded to social media, but I'm sure it was out there. But I did see a few reports from the independent alternative media, and they were battling these people out in the street. I mean, literally having battles. Obviously, these were not gun battles, as there are no reports of gun casualties, but they were out there. And I'll tell you, those guys and the terrorists in Charlottesville, the ones that came to Charlottesville to protect that monument to slavery and in a racist society, they kind of looked kind of silly as they built their shield walls, you know, probably big on Viking mythology and considered themselves Norsemen, and how they were out there with their helmets and their shield walls. Some of it was comical. But obviously, it was a very serious situation with Heather Heyer becoming a victim of one of these terrorists allowed to run wild in the United States. And again, Antifa is the only ones that I really see that's trying to stand in the gap and oppose these terrorists in the street. As we saw in Charlottesville, the police pretty much were there to protect these terrorists' so-called First Amendment speech. And I disagree with a lot of people who try to use the doctrine of the First Amendment to say that terrorists have a right to use threatening language, racialized language to, you know, and I've had this issue with Tim Wise in the past. It's pretty much documented where I called him out after he made a Facebook post saying that Americans have a First Amendment right to stand in the middle of the street and yell nigger at people. And I told him, no, that was not the intent that was given, that was documented in terms of the Bill of Rights, which was actually added to the Constitution later. So I don't want to go through all this constitutional history, but it was protecting a individual citizen's right to speak out against government, to speak out against government officials, not to threaten their fellow Americans. Of course, these white terrorists don't see black people and other non-white people as their fellow Americans. They want to claim this as their homeland, even though they're not indigenous to this land. You know, again, Antifa is the only movement that's really out there opposing these terrorists. Now, we could go back to the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and we could look at the Black Power movement represented by the Black Liberation Army or the Black Panther Party, which tried to stay above ground and quote unquote mainstream. It was an actual political party and a nonprofit organization that was doing a lot of good in the community and was being copied. Other elements like the school lunch program or school breakfast program, the U.S. government got that from the Panthers, and that's all documented. But since then, since the Panthers, we really have not had any type of underground movements, Black Liberation Army underground movements to try to protect the people in the streets. Again, these terrorists are being endorsed by government. Now, I will say this about Charlottesville's clerk, city clerk, or whoever issued the permits and what have you, they did decline it. They did not just give them the permit. They told them now, no, you white terrorists, you white supremacists are not coming to Charlottesville to rally around this monument of this traitor to the United States. You say you love this country so much, and any other day you'll be talking about that USA. So why is you rallying around a monument that represents the CSA, a failed a failed attempt to overthrow the United States government and all its flaws and what have you? But I think they would have implemented a much, much worse system than what we presently, or what they presently had. That's not really saying much. I don't see how it could get that much worse. But I would say it in terms of black people's history, in terms of getting their freedom, probably would have been maybe just 100 years later or so. It might have took another century or whatnot. But again, these are terrorists. They went to Charlottesville to protest. The citizens of Charlottesville, through a democratic process, who acting on a little girl who lives in that area, saying, why do I have to go to this park and play with this statue and this monument on public property dedicated to this white supremacist terrorist who picked up arms against the United States of America and tried to destroy this country. So through a democratic process, they removed that symbol of slavery. And symbols are powerful. Or if symbols weren't powerful, we wouldn't see all throughout ancient history. We still wouldn't be left with all of this symbology and this ancient symbology. And whether we're talking about artifacts or the statues that we see in monuments erected in Egypt that have survived all of these centuries. So people who say monuments are not important, that symbols are not important, are not really taking into account the psyche of human beings and that form of mind control. And so symbols are important. They are very, very, very important. And so these white supremacist terrorists know they're important. And that's why they was out there doing what they did, just trying to prevent another chapter of their possible, because see, we had to be careful when we talk about white people. The vast majority of people classified as white in this system practicing slavery, race-based slavery, they are at most maybe second, third generation. They have not been here as long as the victims of slavery. And again, slavery was never abolished. Check the 13th Amendment, but I'm talking about pre-1865 slavery. They haven't, a lot of them came in right before, maybe 20 or so years before the Civil War, or 20 to 30 years after. They had waves of immigration. So, these people have not even been on this land as long, or as indigenous folks. People born here, whether they be enslaved Africans, whether they be the indigenous tribes, the remnants that have been left over after the European genocide that was committed upon them. So when we talk about these type of people, when we want to use that terminology like Americans and heritage, and these people, most of these people, only 12% of people in the United States can actually trace their ancestor back to the colonial period. So, a lot of these people that's wrapping themselves in these flags are actually, recent immigrants, basically. But they have no problem out here telling other immigrants or indigenous people, like descendants of enslaved Africans and the free black communities that have always existed since the colonial period, and telling us that they got a right to demonize us, to use threatening language. This is terrorism. This is terroristic language. This is not free speech. I disagree with the ACLU. I disagree with the Young Turks, who I'm quite frankly tired of them making excuses and labeling this free speech. It's terrorism. You can't ask Anwar al-Awlaki because he's dead. He was taken out by a U.S. drone despite being a U.S. citizen, because he was very critical of the United States government policy toward international policy. So they killed this man over his free speech. So, you know, these people are terrorists. And it seems that, and I'm not saying that Anwar el-Awlaki was a terrorist. That's what they said. He was a terrorist, and therefore the CEO of USA Inc., it was Barack Obama at the time, had the power to had this person killed by a drone. He was walking around with a kill list. I wonder who's on Donald Trump's kill list. If Barack Obama had one, you know Donald Trump had one. I bet you who's not on it, that's these white supremacist terrorists. They travel internationally too. They go to train, they go to South Africa, they go to Africa to abuse black people sexually, to murder animals, majestic animals, and you know, just being the predators that some of them are. So, you know, this is very, very serious. And so I appreciate Daryle Jenkins, who will be joining us. He founded One People's Project. It's been a while since I've interviewed him on Black Talk Radio News, so he'll be joining us during the second hour. But check out One People's Project. I think that's at, let me check that, onepeoplesproject.com. He is known as, I don't want to call him a leader, because it seems this is basically a leaderless movement, although I'm sure that whenever you have local groups, cells, whatever you want to call them, units, organizations, local organizations, you're going to have a leader. That's just natural. That's especially when it comes to warfare. And they are engaged in warfare against these terrorists, since the United States government won't do their job. So I'll just refer to Daryle Jenkins as a person who is informed about this particular movement. And I invited him to come on to explain to us, how should the black community view this movement. We see these mainly white people, although I have seen it's probably less than 0.5% black people. I mean, I might have seen hundreds of white people in these photos that are circulating online, and one black person. Okay. But there seems to be some black people who are among all of these white people that are out there fighting white people who have self-declared themselves to be white supremacists and adherents to that religion. And so seems to me it's a lot of white people. And again, I support that. I support young white people getting out there in the streets by any means necessary to put these terrorists down. I agree with y'all that they do not have freedom of speech right. They don't have a right to demonize other people so that you can prep the populace for a coming genocide, as they have always done. First comes the propaganda campaign to demonize certain people, and then comes, the genocide, where you then start engaging in acts of mass murder and what have you. So I certainly support young white people. Perhaps these are young white people Malcolm X spoke about, and I'm actually going to play that clip that Malcolm X gave at Oxford University in the UK, where he was saying that, it may come a time where you had these young white people out here who will take on these terrorists. And he actually spoke more on that than I actually had realized, because I came across another video where he was saying that we should I don't want to say use, but we should utilize these young white people who are so eager to prove that they're not racist and that they're against racists to infiltrate the Klan. That was Malcolm X back then, to gather intelligence, because obviously, as has been the sorry history in this country, when it comes to the U.S. government, with the exception of the administration of President Ulysses S. Grant, have openly, I would say, aided and abetted these white terrorists who target all non-white life, whether it be human or animal. And that's just the sorry history of this country. We just have to acknowledge that. If your ancestors was here and they engaged in that, if your ancestor, gave their lives to keep black people in chains and to support a bunch of wealthy planter class white people who really didn't give a damn about you. They weren't providing you with no education, no schools, no public schools. None of that. They was allowing you to hunt on the land that they had stolen and what have you, but you allow them to manipulate you to give your life for. So if that's your ancestor, I mean, I don't see what there is to celebrate. I would be holding my head down in shame if I was you, or at least being honest about it. Let's be honest. These were treacherous. If you want to talk that USA stuff and we're all Americans, well, these were the people who were as anti-American as you can get. So how do you reconcile that? How do we have these two Americas that have been existing since the Civil War? Because the Confederacy, in my opinion, did not lose. I believe they offered a truce. They were offered a truce by Abraham Lincoln. And that truce was in the form of the 13th Amendment, which they allowed these former traitors who all should have been hung or shot by, giving a military tribunal. Again, we dealing with traitors who picked up arms, who were in the enemy army. They all should be hung and shot, and their property that they stole should have been given to the other victims, the people that they victimized. Not invited back into the Congress and allowed to participate in the crafting of this legislation called the 13th Amendment that is allegedly going to abolish slavery, which it did not. Hence the exception clause in there, which is why we were in Washington, D.C. on August the 19th for a huge rally to point out to the public that America lied. Lincoln lied. They did not abolish slavery. So it's a war going. The Civil War is still going on, people. We need to recognize that, and we need to be preparing for that. On Black Talk Radio Network, we have several different programs with a multitude of voices, people coming from different perspectives. But one of the themes that I notice is we're always trying to tell people, it seems collectively that is as a network, telling people to be prepared. Black people, for the most part, are not prepared. They are not prepared to defend themselves against these terrorists. Hence, I'm glad that these young white kids is out there standing in the breach and battling these white terrorists in the streets. It should be them, because the problem wouldn't exist if they didn't allow it to exist. Because let's make no mistake, they wield all the economic power, all the political power. These are their parents. These are their grandparents. So it should be on them and not on black people to put down these white supremacist terrorists. But we as black people can't sit around waiting on other people to do that. Antifa, that's an encouraging sign. Maybe we need to keep encouraging that. Like Malcolm talked about in the 60s, like even Chairman Fred Hampton talked about in Chicago. And, these white kids out here in Chicago just, burning police cars, just aimlessly engaged in all this activity. Well, let's give them a target. Let's help them hone their aim and point them at something. So, I do hear people, and that's okay. We can have unity without uniformity. But I hear people say, well, black people can do it by themselves. If black people could do all this by themselves, they would have been done it. There have only been slightly small segments of the black population throughout history that have engaged in adequate self-defense. I happen to be in one of those communities. You may have heard of Robert F. Williams in the Monroe, North Carolina community, which is just on the other side of Charlotte, probably not even 25 miles from where I am, 25, 30 miles, Monroe, North Carolina, and how the black church had raffles to buy rifles. Again, yeah, the black church, the black Christian church had raffles to buy rifles to arm black men and women in the community and to be trained by people like Robert F. Williams, who was a Korean War veteran and just trained and drilled in just basic military tactics, whether it is from self-defense postures or whether it's going on the offensive if you're forced to. Because when you're on the defense, you can quickly turn that into an offensive, you know? So there have not been a whole lot of those black people who have engaged in that. Black Panther Party, inspired by Malcolm X, as well as Robert F. Williams in that armed self-defense, as well as the Deacons for Defense. We're still talking about a very, very small percentage of black people. So we're pretty much, I would say, defenseless. That's why people was panicking, basically, when we heard about the Second Amendment groups, whether their intentions were nefarious or whether their intentions were pure in saying that, hey, we need to educate you, that you need to buy guns so that you can protect yourself, you know? But people was like, oh my God, these white people, all these white men, they armed, they got rifles, they got guns, they coming into the community. What we gonna do? It was pretty much a panic. See, when you are not prepared, that's what happens. You go into panic mode. Because if there had been a rifle club on that block, like Malcolm X suggested, then there would have been no panic. There would have been a signal sent out and everybody would have went to their appointed positions for self-defense of the community. Okay? So, you know, that is not happening in the black community. So, yes, I'm encouraging these young white kids that is out there trying to put down and confront these white terrorists, because that's what they are. They terrorists. I will not legitimize them in any kind of way. They don't have no kind of constitutional rights, no human rights, especially when their whole aim is to violate other people's human rights. No. And again, I'll play that veteran card. Y'all know how I feel about my military service. But for those where they try to play, you know, the U.S. vets fought for them to have that right. No, the hell I did not. I did not join the United States military. I did not serve 6 years. I did not fight 6 months in the Gulf War for a freaking terrorist back here at home to be at home threatening my people, threatening my family members, and engage in terrorism, just like their forefathers. Hell no, I did. That's not what I signed up for, and I do not recognize the rights of terrorists. And if the U.S. government is going to be selective in how it prosecutes its war on terror, then it is left to the people to prosecute their own war on terror by any means necessary, as Malcolm X so eloquently said all those years ago. By any means necessary. How you going to put a means on how people going to defend themselves? Okay? We're dealing with terrorists who have proven that they are not afraid to kill people, although there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of witnesses, perhaps millions of witnesses, as they saw those cameras and this stuff being streamed out over corporate media. They had no problem committing their acts of terror right in front of everyone. Not trying to hide it. No, we're dealing with terrorists. Then the one guy who recently got arrested for something he did, I can't recall what he did, but he was bragging about to Vice, that TV outlet on the cable network, Vice, I think it's the name of that channel, where he was talking about Ivanka Trump being such a beautiful white woman, and Donald Trump gave his beautiful daughter to a Jew, you know, and saying all that kind of stuff. And then he was also saying that we'll kill these people. I mean, come on. What more of a wake-up call do you need to realize that we are in wartime conditions right now? It ain't no playing games. It ain't no, you know, working on 100-year solutions or 50-year solutions or 20-year solutions. We are in the midst of a war right now, a continuous war. You know, a lot of black revolutionaries will tell you it was a war that was waged on us ever since the first African was kidnapped from Africa and brought here. They've been waging war on us. But I'm speaking in terms, since this country has been established, most people do classify themselves as Americans, or they hold American citizenship, whether they denounce it or not. because if they denounce it, they wouldn't still be here, but they still pay taxes. So I don't want to hear anything about I'm not a U.S. citizen, and you don't identify as one, as I do not identify as one, because I don't want to be identified with the evil that the evil corporation does throughout the galaxy. All right, okay. But we're engaged in a war. I can't say it any simpler than that. As a veteran, let me give you my professional opinion. There's a war going on. And these people in the U.S. government, especially with the CEO that it has now, Donald J. Trump, DJ Trump, has openly coddled these terrorists, just like Woodrow Wilson did, which once Woodrow Wilson did that launched a great period of sorrow and unleashed unprecedented terrorism. And I had to be careful with the word unprecedented, but a tremendous amount of terrorism upon black people, regardless if they were descendants of free black people or formerly enslaved Africans recently declared U.S. citizens by way of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And they just unleashed, the U.S. government did this, just unleash these militias on black people. And you can see it today with the support that the current CEO of USA is giving to these people, these terrorists. These are terrorists. And so since your government, this government that we're paying taxes to, that says that it's protecting us from terrorism all around the world, is showing you how a racist system it is and always has been, as it openly nurtures and aids and abets these terrorists. There have been some encouraging news stories where we have seen some arrests. I actually posted a bunch of stories. I don't know if I'll get to them all, but I posted a bunch of stories of, like, for example, the Georgia couple getting in prison by almost 19, 20 years for racist threats at a child's birthday party. These were flag waving. It was about 6 or 7 trucks. It actually, something similar happened in Gastonia, and I reported on it. It was a couple of years ago. This was right after that terrorist flag came down in South Carolina. I'm right across the border from South Carolina. And these guys in their truck in their Confederate, neo-confederate traitors flags were at Walmart parking lot, saw some black kids walking through a path, going back to their community, and then started to intercept them on the road and terrorize them. You don't have to touch somebody to terrorize somebody. If that was the case, there would be no such laws on the books as communicating a threat. What do you think white supremacy ideology is if it is not communicating a threat to non-white people that they don't classify as white all over the world? You're communicating a threat. And the sad fact is that too many people in the United States tolerate these terrorists, whether it is because that's part of their agenda as participants and stakeholders in USA Inc., the corporation, the evil global corporation that's oppressing so many people, still practicing slavery, or where we have these people who think they're bought into it and are stakeholders, but are nothing more than expendable foot soldiers who have been converted to the religion of white supremacy. But these people are terrorists. They are serious. It is time that you get serious. It is time. These people are telling you that they want to kill you. They parade their guns openly. Actually, in Charlottesville, one of them shot at some protesters. He was just recently arrested because he was caught on camera by the ACLU in Charlottesville, and they just made that arrest. But you out there, we out here with spray cans, shooting flames, and I still love that picture of that brother who I guess he was using whatever tools he had. But anyway, this guy, this white supremacist terrorist in Charlottesville, pulls out a gun and he aims it at the person and then he shoots. He did, and I don't know if he was a bad shot and he intentionally missed the person or accidentally missed the person. But here in Gaston County, North Carolina, we call that assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. That's what we call that. I don't know what they call that up there in Charlottesville, Virginia, but that's what we call that here. So they obviously did arrest him. But my point is that somebody could have been dead. And so if I'm laying in that parking lot dead with, gunshot wounds to my chest, what does it matter that they arrest this man later? I'm dead. I'm not around to know about it. Not even able to defend myself. So, black community, I'm telling you, pay attention to history. You need to arm yourself. You need to become proficient in firearms. And in your preparation, you need to be including firearms, and you need to be networking to provide protection for your community. You never know who's coming to your community. Okay? So, definitely, again, I can't stress enough, I support the Antifa movement. I don't care what these young kids' colors are. I don't care about their skin color. I know they out there in the street battling white terrorists, and I don't see nobody else out there in the street battling white terrorists. So talk is cheap. So y'all white kids, if y'all want to show the world that y'all not down with this racist terrorism that has been going on for centuries in this country, then I say it's incumbent upon you to keep doing what you're doing and even step it up a notch. Okay? Go out there and do what the U.S. government ain't doing, but they taxing us to do. Black people, other non-white people, we all pay taxes to this federal government that's supposed to be protecting us from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And these people are open enemies. I mean, how much anti-American can you get than waving a Confederate flag or a Nazi emblem and what have you? I mean, what's more anti-American than that? And so the American government is siding with these terrorists and saying they have a right to terrorize other American citizens, then that's upon us to defend ourselves by any means necessary. And if it's necessary for us to, I feel like, encourage these young white kids to get out here and battle these terrorists, then I support that. I say do that. Somebody needs to. Because ain't nobody else really doing it. And again, I don't think it should be on black people and the historic victims of white supremacy to put down white supremacy. I think the people who benefit and have all the economic power and the political power, it's on you. It's on you to show and prove. Okay? So I think this is an encouraging sign. Again, Malcolm X talked about stuff like that. Matter of fact, let me pull up Malcolm X's speech, and then I will check the phone lines. But again, coming up at 9 o'clock during the second hour, we will be talking to Daryle Jenkins, One People's Project. And my reason for bringing him on air is to tell our listeners, the Black Talk Radio family, all our subscribers, how should we be looking at this? Should we be seeing them as a threat too? How should the black community? Because again, this is pretty much an underground movement, and they should not really be talking to the press, because every time I would hear Malcolm X or H. Brown or any spokesperson for the movement back then, I'd be like, look, they just trying to get information out of you, bro. When he asking you what kind of movements, what kind of invisible movements is black people involved in? See, that was Mike Wallace. I believe that was Mike Wallace. That was Mike Wallace gathering intel, doing his job, for USA Inc., doing his job for the FBI. So, a lot of times it's good not to speak to the media. But I've been knowing Daryle and following his work for a number of years now. Definitely, I would go to war with him. He is a United States veteran as well. Actually was a law enforcement specialist in the United States Air Force. So he seems to be plugged into the anti-fascist movement. Mr. Jenkins is a black person, by the way, not that it matters in this context, but he will be coming to just, tell us what we need to know. Are these friends? Are they foes? Is the enemy of my enemy my friend? Or, do I need to be organizing and preparing for after when they get done with each other? Are they going to then turn on me? It doesn't, I'm just trying to consider every scenario. I'm not trying to insinuate everything, but we have to prepare for every possibility. So looking forward to speaking to Mr. Jenkins at the top of the hour. By the way, the telephone number, if you have a question or comment, you can get in on this broadcast of BTR News. Again, we're streaming live right now. It is August 29th, 2017. And I'm just basically talking about the state of white terrorism in this country and how the United States government isn't protecting its own citizens and is actually coddling these terrorists and encouraging attacks. And that, somebody has to step up and stand in the breach and the gap. Because obviously law enforcement isn't going to do it when they're playing the role of slave catchers in a system that is practicing slavery. So how logical is it to expect slave catchers to protect you from white supremacist terrorists? Again, I'm not trying to issue a blanket indictment against the hundreds of different law enforcement agencies. Some of them might be out there actually trying to do a good job. Some sheriff's counties might be not tolerating that type of stuff. I don't know. I can't say. But I have to say it's time to stop tolerating this terrorism. It is time to end the Civil War once and for all, with the conclusion being an actual end to slavery. And in today's 21st century slavery and human trafficking, I care not the skin color of the slave. I care not the skin color of the enslaver, because they come in all sizes, shapes, and skin colors. All I care about is ending slavery. So if you're on that other side of that battle line than me, then guess what? You're my enemy. You've made yourself my enemy. You made yourself an enemy of humanity just by the mere fact that you are practicing slavery. So again, if we need these sort of things, we actually do. Revolution is not going, and when I say revolution, I'm talking about revolutionary change is not going to come about by people just sitting around talking about it or thinking about it or preparing for it, but hoping that it never comes. So anything that disrupts the system, we do need to analyze it, but at the same time, we have to make sure we're getting and giving accurate information. If nobody else is going to be out there in the streets battling these people, somebody need to, because doggone it, these people are likely to start engaging in genocidal acts. So I said I was going to pull up that Malcolm X speech at Oxford. That was Oxford speech. This was after his what they call it, Hajj to Mecca. So I'm just going to play this speech. We're going to do it a service. Not going to play the full debate, but we're going to play about 12 minutes of the Oxford Union debate, which occurs on December the 3rd, 1964. Again, this is Malcolm X. Pay attention to what he's talking about in terms of revolutionary change.
You make my point. That as long as a white man does it, it's all right. A black man is supposed to have no feelings. But when a black man strikes back, he's an extremist. He's supposed to sit passively and have no feelings, be nonviolent, and love his enemy, no matter what kind of attack, be it verbal or otherwise. Ends up and in any way tries to defend himself, then he's an extremist. No, I think that the speaker who preceded me is getting exactly what he asked for. My reason for believing in extremism, intelligently directed extremism, extremism in defense of liberty, extremism in quest of justice, is because I firmly believe in my heart that the day that the black man takes an uncompromising step and realizes that he's within his rights, when his own freedom is being jeopardized, to use any means necessary to bring about his freedom or put a halt to that injustice, I don't think he'll be by himself. I live in America where there are only 22 million blacks against probably 160 million whites. One of the reasons that I'm in no way reluctant or hesitant to do whatever is necessary to see that black people do something to protect themselves, I honestly believe that the day that they do, many whites will have more respect for them, and that there'll be more whites on their side than are now on their side with these little wishy-washy love thy enemy approach that they've been using up to now. And if I'm wrong, then you're a racialist. As I said earlier, in my conclusion, I'm a Muslim. I believe in the religion of Islam. I believe in Allah. I believe in Muhammad. I believe in all of the prophets. I believe in fasting, prayer, charity, and that which is incumbent upon a Muslim to fulfill in order to be a Muslim. In April, I was fortunate to make the Hajj to Mecca and went back again in September to try and carry out my religious functions and requirements. But at the same time that I believe in that religion, I have to point out I'm also an American Negro. And I live in a society whose social system is based upon the castration of the black man, whose political system is based on castration of the black man, and whose economy is based upon the castration of the black man. A society which in 1964 has more subtle, deceptive, deceitful methods to make the rest of the world think that it's cleaning up its house, while at the same time the same things are happening to us in 1964 that happened in 1954, 1924, and in 1984. They came up with what they call a civil rights bill in 1964, supposedly to solve our problem, and after the bill was signed, 3 civil rights workers were murdered in cold blood. And the FBI head, Hoover, admits that they know who did it. They've known ever since it happened, and they've done nothing about it. Civil rights bill down the drain. No matter how many bills pass, black people in that country, where I'm from, still our lives are not worth 2 cents. And the government has shown its inability, or either its unwillingness, to do whatever is necessary to protect life and property where the black American is concerned. So my contention is that whenever a people come to the conclusion that the government which they have supported proves itself unwilling or proves itself unable to protect our lives and protect our property because we have the wrong color skin, we are not human beings unless we ourselves band together and do whatever, however, whenever is necessary to see that our lives and our property is protected. And I doubt that any person in here would refuse to do the same thing were he in the same position, or I should say, were he in the same condition. Just one step farther to see am I justified in this stand. And I say, I'm speaking as racist as South Africa, or as racist as Portugal, or as racist as any other racialist society on this earth. The only difference between it and South Africa preaches separation and practices separation. America preaches integration and practices segregation. This is the only difference. They don't practice what they preach. Whereas South Africa preaches and practices the same thing. I have more respect for a man who lets me know where he stands, even if he's wrong, than the one who comes up like an angel and is nothing but a devil. The system of government that America has consists of committees. There are are 16 senatorial committees that govern the country and 20 congressional committees. 10 of the 16 senatorial committees are in the hands of Southern racialist senators who are racialists. 13 of the 20, about this was before the last election. I think it's even more so now. 10 of the 16 committees, senatorial committees, are in the hands of senators who are Southern racialists. 13 of the 20 congressional committees were in the hands of Southern congressmen who are racialists, which means out of the 36 committees that govern the foreign and domestic direction of that government, 23 are in the hands of Southern racialists, men who in no way believe in the equality of man, and men who do anything within their power to see that the black man never gets to the same seat or to the same level that they are on. The reason that these men from that area have that type of power is because America has a seniority system. And these who have that seniority have been there longer than anyone else because the black people in the areas where they live can't vote. And it is only because the black man is deprived of his vote that puts these men in positions of power that gives them such influence in the government beyond their actual intellectual or political ability, or even beyond the number of people from the areas that they represent. So we can see in that country that no matter what the federal government professes to be doing, the power of the federal government lies in these committees. And anytime a black man or any kind of legislation is proposed to benefit the black man or give the black man his just due, we find that it's locked up in these committees right here. And when they let something through the committee, usually it is so chopped up and fixed up that by the time it becomes law, it's a law that can't be enforced. Well, another example is the Supreme Court desegregation decision that was handed down in 1954. This is a law. And this law, they have not been able to implement this law in New York City or in Boston or in Cleveland or Chicago or the northern cities. And my contention is that any time you have a country, supposedly a democracy, supposedly the land of the free and the home of the brave, and it can't enforce laws, even in the northernmost cosmopolitan and progressive part of it, that will benefit a black man, if those laws can't be enforced or that law can't be enforced, how much heart do you think we will get when they pass some civil rights legislation which only involves more law? If they can't enforce this law, they'll never enforce those laws. So my contention is that we are faced with a racialistic society, a society in which they are deceitful, deceptive, and the only way we can bring about a change is to talk the kind of language, speak the language that they understand. The racialist never understands a peaceful language. The racialist never understands the nonviolent language. The racialist, he's spoken his language to us for 400 years. We have been the victim of his brutality. We are the ones who face his dogs that tear the flesh from our limbs, only because we want to enforce the Supreme Court decision. We are the ones who have our skulls crushed, not by the Ku Klux Klan, but by policemen, only because we want to enforce what they call the Supreme Court decision. We are the ones upon whom water hoses are turned with pressure so hard that it rips the clothes from our back. Not men, but the clothes from the backs of women and children. You've seen it yourself. Only because we want to enforce what they call the law. Well, anytime you live in a society supposedly based upon law, and it doesn't enforce its own law because the color of a man's skin happens to be wrong, then I say those people are justified to resort to any means necessary to bring about justice where the government can't give them justice. I don't believe in any form of unjustified extremism. But I believe that when a man is exercising extremism, a human being is exercising extremism in defense of liberty for human beings, it's no vice. And when one is moderate in the pursuit of justice for human beings, I say he's a sinner. And I might add in my conclusion In fact, America is one of the best examples when you read its history about extremism. Old Patrick Henry said liberty or death. That's extreme. Very extreme. I read once passingly about a man named Shakespeare. I only read about him passingly, but I remember one thing he wrote that kind of moved me. He put it in the mouth of Hamlet, I think it was, who said, to be or not to be. He was in doubt about something. Whether it was nobler in the mind of man to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, moderation, or to take up arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. And I go for that. If you take up arms, you'll end it. But if you sit around and wait for the one who's in power to make up his mind that he should end it, you'll be waiting a long time. And in my opinion, the young generation of whites, blacks, browns, whatever else there is, you're living at a time of extremism, a time of revolution, a time when there's got to be a change. People in power have misused it, and now there has to be a change, and a better world has to be built, and the only way it's going to be built is with extreme methods. And I, for one, will join in with anyone. Don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth. Thank you.
So again, that was Malcolm X speaking at the Oxford Union debate on December the 3rd, 1964. And that speech is very applicable to what we see on the ground today. I think that this white supremacy is pretty extreme, in my opinion. I think it's pretty extreme when you want to harm other individuals, when you want to deny them basic human rights simply because of the texture of their hair, simply because of the color of their skin. That's extremism. And that extremism has manifested itself throughout U.S. history as terrorism. There's no denying that. That's just well documented. I don't see how anybody can argue that point. But yet the response to this terrorism that's directed at non-white people, terrorists that is, as Malcolm called them, being perpetrated by racialists. Today we call them white supremacists. And, the government pretty much is letting them have free reign. Again, we're being told that they have a right to have these gatherings, to terrorize people, to use threatening language and express their terrorist ideology. Let me ask you, when the last time you seen an ISIS gathering of about 100, 200 people? You think they would be allowed to do that openly? No, you can't even post an ISIS flag on your Facebook profile without raising some red flags, and then you'll end up on somebody's terrorist watch list. And you'll be under closer scrutiny than you already are. You can't do that. Certainly Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old son, and later during the Trump administration, his 8-year-old daughter, all U.S. citizens, but of the non-white variety, certainly they were not afforded the rights and privileges that are supposed to be guaranteed by the United States Constitution. So we have a failure of enforcement, as Malcolm X was talking about, these various laws. I know I hear sometimes people say, well, the law wasn't written for you, it was written for this or that or the other. Well, you know what? That may have not been the intent, but the words are what the words are. And the words form sentences. And those sentences say something. And those sentences are either promoting justice or is promoting injustice. Okay? So, I think, that these laws against terrorism ought to be prosecuted, ought to be used against these domestic terrorists. And the United States government should stop coddling these terrorists and encouraging them. No other groups are allowed to do this. So, we need people to step up. And right now, we got a lot of young white kids stepping up. And they need to step up in the fashion that Malcolm X just talked about. If they feel like in their consciousness and their heart that, hey, somebody needs to pay for America's sins, and first we need to end slavery, and we need to end racism, and we can't tolerate it. Somebody has to do it. And I say it should fall to white people because they benefited from it the most. So if that's what you want to say to the rest of the world, that I am not like those people over there, I don't subscribe to white supremacist ideology, I am not a terrorist, I don't mean other human beings harm, then as Malcolm talked about, in the defense of liberty, since you have the most power in this world, then use that power and wield it on in defense of liberty of human beings. Somebody needs to do it. And I'm just glad to see it being done. Because usually what'll happen is they'll have a little terrorist rally around with their little flags or whatever they're rallying around, and they just act like a bunch of animals and just say a whole bunch of racist, nonsensical, anti-liberty and freedom stuff. And the crowds gawk and they look, and we share it on social media and all of that. But that's about the extent of our response. It's the point and look and say, hey, look at these people. These are terrorists, or these are white supremacists, and they want to kill people. But, you know, your response has to be more than just verbal. Because obviously they are engaged in more than just verbal threats. Again, they ran down that woman and injured a whole bunch of people. Again, we point to story after story of these people engaged in terrorist acts. So let me go ahead and get my guest, Daryle Jenkins, to tell us about this Antifa movement. I'm actually 1 minute over, and I will take a station identification break. And we should have Daryle on the line on the other side. Again, Daryle Jenkins is with One People's Project. He's a founder. He's a military veteran himself. And he seems to be informed about this movement. I don't want to say he's a leader in this movement, because this has pretty much been a leaderless movement. But I think the black community, as we see this stuff in the news, that we may have some concerns and we may have some questions. And he seems to be a person who can provide some of that information. So we're going to take our station identification break, and we'll come back. We should have Mr. Daryle Lamont Jenkins on the line. Again, the founder of One People's Project. You're listening to Black Talk Radio News, broadcasting on Black Talk Radio Network, the premier black digital radio station, providing you with new black media for the new millennium. Visit us again online at blacktalkradionetwork.com, where you will discover a lot of independently produced radio stations as well as podcasts. And you can also check the station schedule for other live programming, although we will have some changes coming up. One of the recent changes is now I'm doing 2 hours, the afternoon music mix from 12 to 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. So, and also, of course, we'll be sharing news and information throughout that time. All right, we'll be back on the other side. This is Scotty Reid, Black Talk Radio News.
Black Talk Radio Network is made possible in part with help from the Black Talk Media Project, a North Carolina-based nonprofit engaged in the production and distribution of independent digital black media. Find out more by going to blacktalkradionetwork.com or blacktalkmediaproject.org and look for the menu tab, Crowdfunding Black Media. Black Talk Media Project, helping to provide you with new black media for the new millennium. tuned in to Black Talk Radio, new black media for the new millennium.
No, it really isn't. Because, see, people are thinking in terms of, well, they want to brag about being black, which means that they are implying that there's something incorrect about being white, even though these are the creations of the Creator. See, and then so everybody gets into this black pride thing or white pride thing, and people immediately start taking sides. It's not about taking sides based on black and white. It's about taking sides based on justice and non-justice. Well, that's what you're really aiming for. Being black doesn't mean anything if you don't believe in justice. And being white doesn't mean anything if you don't believe in justice, except you believe in non-justice. And that doesn't make any difference what shade you are, or how tall you are, or who your cousin was, or anything like that, or what so-called nationality you have. Like a lot of people say that they take pride in being an Englishman, or take pride in being a Frenchman, or take pride in being Afrocentric. Well, you're not supposed to be proud of any of those things if you don't believe in justice, because these words mean nothing. No nationality means anything. And waving a flag if you don't believe in not mistreating people. You got to believe in not mistreating people, and you got to believe in helping people that need help the most. Otherwise, you don't even have any business breathing.
And welcome back to Black Talk Radio News. Scotty Reid in on this broadcast from behind the enemy lines that I call USA Inc. And as we go into the second hour, we are joined by our guest. Let me give him a proper introduction. It's been a while since I've actually talked on the phone with Brother Lamont. With Brother Jenkins. And so he's going to educate us on this Antifa movement, because people in the black community may have some questions about what they are seeing a little bit that they are seeing in the mainstream media. And we definitely don't want to just take the perspective or the propagandization of this movement from the corporate media. So I reached out to Daryle Lamont Jenkins, who is founder of One People's Project. Again, also a former law enforcement specialist in the United States Air Force, and he is currently a Philadelphia-based veteran of the anti-fascist movement, and he's here tonight to answer our questions and help us understand as much as we need to know about this movement. So, Brother Daryle, do we got you on the line, brother?
How you doing today?
I'm doing as well as can be expected under these terroristic conditions where terrorists are allowed to run wild, so I'm doing as well as can be expected. How about yourself, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good considering the whole terrorist situation that we have right now. I think I got a little bit of an echo going on, so
it'll go away
if I have any issues here speaking. But yeah, I feel you on this.
Okay. Sorry about that. Sometimes it will have an echo. Let me mute you and unmute you. Sometimes that'll clear it up. But if you hear it in the beginning, just keep talking and it'll go away. Sometimes that's how the system does. But Daryle, thank you for agreeing on short notice to come on tonight to inform us about, am I pronouncing this correctly, Antifa?
I pronounce it Antifa, but you sometimes hear Antifa. But remember, Antifa is short for anti-fascist.
Right.
So Antifa is the proper way of pronouncing it.
Okay, thank you for that correction. Antifa. All right. So I've been
Antifa.
Antifa.
It's when you speak it real fast, Antifa.
Antifa. Yeah, Antifa. All right. So Antifa has been one of the few I don't want to say it's an organization. It seems to just be an underground collective of people who are anti-racist. Some may be coming from different camps. I read up a little bit about the roots in the punk scene, the punk rock scene, and just people becoming intolerant of race-based terrorism and what have you. So, I mean, there is a little bit out there. But once I saw that you seem to be a person that media is looking to get some information, I thought I would invite you to come on tonight because a lot of black people are looking at this, and with the bulk of those Antifa protesters being white, some of them are expressing some concerns or what have you, even though from what I've gathered, they've been engaged in great work in battling terrorists in the street when law enforcement is just standing by letting the terrorists run wild. So can you tell us as much as you can? I don't want you to share too much. Don't give away no secrets or nothing like that. But what is the extent of your involvement? I know you've been described as a long-time anti-fascist activist, but you came on my radar years ago for your work in opposing these white nationalist groups, and seemingly sometimes the only organization that was out there opposing some of these people. So what is the extent of your involvement?
Well, see, the thing is, Antifa has been around even before we had a name for it here in the States. I mean, anybody who was against the hatred and bigotry that's been going on over the course of 400 years is going to be Antifa, even if we don't call it that. I mean, I always try to make the point, let's face it, Martin Luther King was Antifa. So everybody who is going to fight this white supremacy is going to be anti-fascist in one form or another. Doesn't mean you have to dress up as a ninja and wear a mask or whatever, as folks will say. Truth be told, if you're out there and you're in their face, you have become anti-fascist to this crowd, to that white supremacist crowd. I've been involved for 30 years. I've been involved ever since I was in the Air Force. Yes, I was a law enforcement specialist. After I left, I went on and tried to work more for the people. I didn't think I can do it as a police officer, though. I thought I had probably do it as a writer. I think that was where my strength always lied. Basically reaching out to folks with my pen, with my voice. So basically what I did is, if I'm going to be a journalist, I have to know how to research. I have to know how to report. And that's what One People's Project does. We research and report on hate groups, particularly right-wing groups, and try to encourage communities to be proactive against them, basically diminish their ability to function. And One People's Project has been around for 17 years, and we were pretty successful in that. We got conferences shut down. We got people fired from their jobs. We brought political campaigns to a standstill, all because there are some folks on the right that just could not stay away from this particular element. But now we're kind of like in a crisis mode because they got themselves a president. And I don't mean there's always been white supremacist presidents in the past, right, and in the present. But this one's basically openly greenlighting them, right? Openly being blatant about it. And if they are that comfortable, that means we got some work to do. That means that we have to be open and we have to be proactive and we have to make sure that they understand that they are not going to push anybody back. We're going to push them back. We fought too hard for this over the past 400 years for them to come along feeling their oaths and thinking that they're going to take away from us. That's not happening. But in order for people to do that, they got to have the right tools. The right tools is information, and that's what One People's Project provides. And Antifa, the more hardcore groups out there, they have used the information that we have to help be proactive against these groups. That's where we come from.
Right. Again, I came across your work years ago and definitely expressed my support for what you're doing, because like you mentioned about using the power of the pen, and if you're going to be a journalist, you got to know how to research but Malcolm X, where we were just playing his Oxford Union debate speech, which was given on December the 3rd, 1964, but Malcolm has talked about the power of media. He said that media is the most powerful entity on the face of the planet. It controls the minds of the masses. It can make the innocent look guilty and the guilty look innocent. And one of the things that I've been noticing on social media, Daryle, is that you have elements of the right wing, and I'm talking about, although they like to portray themselves as the alt-right, but I consider people like Sheriff David Clark up there in Wisconsin. I consider him to be mainstream Republican. I don't consider him to be a fringe or anything. Certainly with this administration, now for whatever reason, the Trump administration, I found it hard to believe, found David Clark to be too toxic, even for his administration. So that should tell you something about yourself, David Clark. But I've noticed David Clark, the filmmaker, the Indian-born filmmaker that made the Obama hit pieces. I can't remember his name right now.
Dinesh D'Souza.
Yeah, Dinesh D'Souza. Thank you. So I follow these people and gathering my intelligence. I follow them on social media to see what they're saying, what they're putting out as propaganda to the people. And those two have really stood out to me in producing Antifa propaganda and using and describing them as terrorists and describing these good people. I'm calling them good people. Anybody out there putting their life on the line to battle and bloody white supremacist terrorists who have been allowed to thrive in this country, to me, that's a good person. Or if you're not a good person, you're engaged in good work. So keep up the good work. But I see a concerted effort to paint this movement as a terrorist movement, which I find comical.
Well, when we're talking about various individuals on that side of the aisle, so to speak, on that right wing side, I mean, you mentioned David Clark. David Clark looks like he's trying to run a game. He thinks that all he needs to do is just talk trash about black people, and all the right wingers just falling all over him. That's all he does. That's all he does. He doesn't really do his job. His job is to basically be a propaganda tool for this racist right wing. Dinesh D'Souza, there's a little bit more to him than just trash talking. The man, if you want to call him that, is about neo-colonialism. That has always been his game. That is what he fights for. Despite himself being of color, he believes that he has this notion that people of color cannot run their own lands, cannot run their own communities. Therefore, Europeans must come in and run them for people of color.
Now, this guy's an Indian. We must point that out. He was born in Bombay, India, and we know the history of colonialism in India. But go ahead, Daryle.
Yeah, and to give an idea of how silly he can get, I mean, he's always been racist, even from his college days. I mean, he was writing racist articles back while he was in Dartmouth. But you're talking about somebody who's dated Ann Coulter, Laura Ingraham, basically the women that he would date or marry, with the exception of his current wife, has always been blonde-haired, blue-eyed. Now we found himself a brunette. But he's always defending white supremacy. He's always done that. He did some sort of boastful routine about defending Nazis yesterday on Twitter, and Twitter just blew up on him over that. So Dinesh D'Souza, people see right through him. People know what kind of game he's playing, just like they know what David Clark is playing. Last time I saw David Clark, besides before CPAC, the Third Political Action Conference, he was at this thing called the Deplorable Ball. The Deplorable Ball was where all the white supremacists got together. A certain group of white supremacists got together the night before the inauguration. Everybody that we was pretty much going after was in that room, and he was among them. He was among a lot of these clowns, and if this is the company he wants to keep, he can't keep company with us. But the problem is he's law enforcement. He needs to stop being law enforcement. We really need to do something about removing him from his office so he can ride off into the sunset and get his reap his reward at Fox News for what that's worth. But the bottom line is,
Daryle, I would say he needs to be prosecuted.
That needs to be removed.
He needs to be prosecuted for murder of several individuals, including a baby. He should be indicted for at least manslaughter or second-degree murder for the conditions that occurred or that exist in that Milwaukee County jail in Wisconsin.
I agree.
Yeah. So, but
I agree. And the best thing about him is that if he does get convicted, Donald Trump can't pardon him because those are state charges.
Right. But my reasoning for bringing up even Dinesh D'Souza, him, and Coulter, others is they still have tremendous influence with these individuals out here. And I feel like, again, that Dinesh D'Souza, I've seen where I feel like he goes further than just providing cover or justification, but that he is also, I would say, is encouraging this sort of terrorism. I mean, for right now, he has a book out. I don't want to really plug his book, but the audacity of this man to write a book called The Big Lie. For those who don't know propaganda history, the big lie is a technique or a concept developed by Adolf Hitler. All right. And he said the bigger the lie, the more the people will believe it. That's the short version of it. And so Dinesh D'Souza, master propagandist, comes out with this book now. And he's calling it The Big Lie, but he's saying that it's the left that's practicing fascism and Nazism. It's like, this dude, man, I don't like him, but at the same time, I gotta respect his skill because he's dangerous, as well as even a bumbling, some people might call him an idiot, David Clark. They're still dangerous because they are openly coddling these terrorists, and I just feel like, that's just dangerous, Daryle.
Well, that's one of the reasons why groups like mine are out there, because we try to make sure that to lessen their danger by making sure that people are informed about what they do. Dinesh D'Souza's routine about the big lie, about how the left are the true fascists or whatever. Fascism and Nazism is right wing. So he's already diminished because he doesn't even know what the hell he's talking about. But then again, you go back about 20 years when I first started going after him, and he wrote a book called The End of Racism, where he basically tried to make an argument, essentially, that there has never been racism in this country, that it's all been misconstrued. In that, he basically tried to whitewash slavery. He tried to suggest that segregation was not a bad thing, that it was actually trying to protect Black people, and so on. So he's not exactly somebody that you take as having anything of relevance intellectually that he brings to the argument.
But he's not trying to convince, Daryle. He's not trying to convince intellectuals, though.
He's not trying to convince any of us. He's basically trying to rally his troops.
Exactly.
He's trying to rally that right-wing base and give them propaganda to use. And if you know how to shoot it down when you hear it, then it doesn't work. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't, because a lot of people don't study. A lot of people don't research the things that many of us might. So so OPP tries to make it easy as possible for people to understand what he's doing. And the others out there that are trying to pull this stuff.
Daryle, there's something that has really been annoying me, I would say, for the past 3 weeks. And I'm sure it's always been there, and perhaps I'm just becoming more aware, or I'm just getting more annoyed by it. But there are people who are considered on the left or progressives and in alternative media. I'm talking about the Young Turks. Have a very popular YouTube channel, and I've heard more than one host express that these white supremacist terrorists have rights under the Bill of Rights, under the First Amendment, to engage in the terroristic speech. And I take issue with that. The right wing likes to talk about the intent of the framers. And the intent of the framers, when they were going over the 10 amendments that was to be added to the Constitution later, the First Amendment when it was talking about freedom of speech, it was talking about the freedom to criticize your government free of state prosecution or state oppression, for a citizen to be able to openly criticize his town mayor or his sheriff or his president or her president. And so, unless my research is wrong, that was the intent of the so-called freedom of speech doctrine. It was not the intent to allow one group of American citizens to have rallies, to engage in propagandizing other American citizens, to terrorize another group of American citizens based on their skin color. And that just really annoys me. And I've been reading that the Antifa Movement says, kind of agrees that, no, these people don't have a right to preach their hateful ideologies and engage in this terroristic speech in communicating these threats to their would-be victims. I mean, what are your thoughts personally on that, being that you're a writer, being that you're a journalist? And I do, being a journalist, an independent journalist, for about the past 9 years now, I do take freedom of the press and freedom of speech seriously. But at the same time, there's limits to everything. And when your rights start to intrude upon my rights, then you are out of bounds. That you have crossed over the limits of freedom and liberty, because now you're affecting me. What are your thoughts?
Well, the truth of the matter is that whenever you hear the free speech argument, it's really just a cop-out. They don't want to get into real arguments with these folks, and they're trying to find a way to defend the indefensible. And the truth of the matter is, they need to spend more time defending the freedom of speech of those that are opposing them. They always try to tell you that the best way to fight hate speech is with more speech. But when some of us come out there and start using that more speech, they still tell us to shut up. I mean, if we said something that offended them, we wouldn't be talking about how we had the right to speak. They'll be talking about something about yelling fire in a crowded theater. So my attitude to that is to simply recognize that argument as the cop out for what it is, ignore it, because one of the things they also try to tell you is ignore them and they will go away. That hasn't happened. But ignore those that are trying to tell you that the Nazis have freedom of speech. Recognize your own, and also recognize that those individuals whose freedom of speech they are defending are using that freedom of speech to deny everyone else theirs and other freedom. That is where the fight really is. You cannot defend, if you were going to go that route, you cannot defend the freedom of speech of those who want to undermine yours while you don't fight back, or you get in the way of those who are fighting back using their freedom of speech. It's meaningless when you do things like that. I remember a couple of years ago, back in 2009, as a matter of fact, Eric Holder talked about how when it comes to the issue of racism, we are a nation of cowards. And a lot of people got upset with him terming it that way. And that is the perfect example of how cowardly we are. This is a element that we need to fight. And every time we try to fight it, there is always somebody that will get in our way. And it took somebody to die in Charlottesville for people to say, okay, we cannot stand down on this anymore. We got to do something. And all of a sudden you start seeing people do things to these right wingers, to these neo-fascists, to these white supremacists, that they could have done years ago. The website Stormfront is the first neo-Nazi website on the internet. It's been around for 20 years. Someone made the point that over 100 murders have been attributed to the people that have regularly posted on that website. And after Charlottesville, that's when their registrar, that is the registrar of their domain, managed to take their entire website off the internet. Could have done that 20 years ago.
Yes.
But because everybody wants to cop out with the freedom of speech line, it stayed where it was for 20 years, and everybody was there allowed to run free and cause people harm. And I say, we have the tools to fight this.
Right.
The biggest barrier to that ends up being folks that we call our friends.
What do you mean?
And that's something we got to deal with. That's something I find myself fighting liberals more than I fight the right.
Oh, do you mean
Because
those who say, oh, you shouldn't use violence, you shouldn't oppose violence with violence, and no, that's not the way to do things. What you want to do is X, Y, and Z. Do you mean those type of people? Because I noticed that I've seen a theme in the media where they're trying to get certain people to denounce this violence.
Well, what I've been telling people, and I tweeted this out, is like, if you think that the way to approach, if you think there's the way that some people approach fascism, trying to find a solution, if you feel that their way is not, quote unquote, the answer, you better be putting the answer into motion, for whatever you call the answer into motion. A lot of these folks who are out there simply aren't doing anything. They think everything's just fine. They don't want the society to be destabilized, when for many respects it probably already is.
Well, it certainly is for black people.
It is, and they don't see that. I mean, it's one of the things about, and here's an important thing to talk about when it comes to white allies is that the white allies, the Antifa that you see in the street all the time, throwing down, they see it. Problem is, they're up against people who are not white allies, to underscore a fact. Folks who want things to remain the way they are. Either they're that conservative right wing, or they're just a liberal that just likes the establishment.
Right.
And they look at, and both groups look at Antifa as a threat to that, because they help us get through the door. And if there's one thing that these particular elements do not like, is us coming through. We saw what happened when Barack Obama ran against Hillary Clinton. She's supposed to be on our side. It didn't look that way in 2008.
No, especially when she encouraged this assassination in so many words.
And some people forget a lot of those things. And I think that one of the things I always talk about whenever it comes to New York Democrats, for example, and one of my lines I always say, there's one thing, the one thing that New York Democrats hate more than racism is black people, because they're always opposing us, no matter what it is. Listen to Alan Dershowitz today. Listen to how Alan Dershowitz talks when he goes up on Fox News and opposes the Confederate monuments as erasing history. That's their language. That's the language of the right. Yes. He's supposed to be a liberal.
Right.
Or when he goes after, let us not forget what he tried to do with Keith Ellison, when he went after him. Mm-hmm. And you think about, okay, these supposed to be the folks on our side? And these are the ones who will immediately defend the freedom of speech of Nazis before they defend ours. That's where the real problem is.
How about standing up for our freedom from terrorism?
And they don't care about that. They don't even see it as terrorism. They just see it as a political disagreement between two different sides, Antifa and the Nazis, as if they had nothing to do with it.
Well, we had to change.
And we have to change that.
Yeah, we had to change the language. We had to change the language. The power of words have been demonstrated to me we hear about the power of words all the time, whether it's in a spiritual sense, biblical sense, or whether it's coming from somebody like a Malcolm X. But words are powerful, and we can change the words that people are using. Like for right now, I'm engaged in a new abolitionist movement to end legalized slavery and human trafficking in this country. And we oppose in the language of mass incarceration. When people say mass incarceration, and no, we're fighting against slavery. We're trying to abolish slavery. We're not trying to abolish a symptom of slavery. We're trying to abolish slavery. And the 13th Amendment clearly has a loophole that permits prison slavery. So it's all about, and we're starting to see that. I'm starting to see it even more after our march on Washington on August the 19th, and just noticing it in social media communications and the stuff that I'm reading is that, and also I would say on the issue of these white supremacists, I am starting to notice more people refer to them as terrorists, in the media. Maybe not on Fox News, maybe not on CNN, but on some of these local papers that you can, of course, access online, I am starting to see these white supremacist terrorists referred to as such. Daryle.
You can't help it.
Yeah, I need to take our last station identification break of the night. If you could hang going through the break, I certainly would appreciate it. How are you on time?
I'm good on time. I'm all right. It's
okay.
I'll rock and roll for the rest of the hour if you need me.
All right, thanks for that. All right, well, you're listening to Black Talk Radio News. My name is Scotty Reid. We do this 2-hour broadcast every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Again, our home is Black Talk Radio. Find us online at blacktalkradionetwork.com. Get the TuneIn app, and I do want to just keep reminding people. We do have our own social media community. I'm not telling people, hey, leave these other social media communities like Facebook and Twitter, because I'm on there. I need it for my job to gather intelligence. But when I want to get with building within the community, when I want to just associate with people online who are like-minded and share my culture, I go to btrcommunity.com, which was set up in August, Black August of last year. So check us out online, btrcommunity.com. There is a $24 subscription for this ad-free social media community. And guess what? That's how we were able, in part, to fund our new abolitionist trip to Washington, D.C. and sponsor that PA system. So we're just trying to come up with creative ways to fund our own movement, and you can support the network by taking out a 1-year subscription to BTR Community. We'll be back on the other side. Mr. Daryle Lamont Jenkins of One People's Project is our guest tonight. We're talking about an Antifa and white terrorism. And I'm going to keep applauding the work of these young white men and women, and I am seeing a few people of color out there as well. But hell, if the United States government won't take these terrorists on, then somebody's got to do it, and I certainly appreciate you stepping up. We'll be back on the other side.
The Black Talk Media Project funds the use of new media technology in efforts to restore independent Black voices to the myriad of issues affecting Afro-descendant people all over the planet. If media can control the minds of the masses, as Malcolm X once said, then you must ask yourself, who is in control of the media targeting the masses of Black people today? Help bring back independence, self-determination, and respect for Black culture in the production of global media by joining the effort to crowdfund new Black media for the new millennium. Visit blacktalkmediaproject.org for more information on how you can invest in public Black radio for the masses.
And welcome back to Black Talk Radio News on this Tuesday night. It's August the 29th, 2017. Daryle Lamont Jenkins of One People's Project is my guest for tonight. We're talking about the Antifa Movement, which is opposing fascism, racism, and white supremacist terrorists that have been given free rein to roam the streets of America. But it seems that in this new millennium, if you will, in this new century, as we enter into the 21st century, perhaps ushered in by the eclipse of the sun that possibly, I believe, had not been seen since Nat Turner went on his quest for freedom, inspired by that and interpreting that event as a spiritual and religious inspiration to try to get some freedom and what have you. So in the spirit of freedom, we're talking to Daryle Lamont Jenkins again of One People's Project. Let me give out the phone numbers. We will take some calls if you have a question or a comment for Mr. Jenkins tonight on our topic. Give us a call at 866-510-8820. 9025. That's 866-510-9025. That's a toll-free number. You can also chat with us at uberconference.com/Black Talk Radio network. There you will also find international numbers so you can call in toll-free. Daryle, we do got a call on the board. You cool for taking calls?
Absolutely.
All right, let's jump to 347. Thank you for calling in to Black Talk Radio News. If you would share your name or a name and go ahead with your question or comment.
Hey Scotty, how are you? This is Thomas Smith from New York.
What's going on, Thomas? I'm doing the best I can under these terroristic conditions. How about you?
I'm trying to survive as well, my brother. I have a question for the gentleman. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
First, I wanted to say I don't believe in white allies. My research on Antifa, I didn't like what I saw. So you definitely shined a new light on it. I definitely didn't like what I was hearing from the white Antifa research members that I researched, and some of their perspective and thoughts. I didn't really see them as really taking on counter racism, really looking out for their own agendas. So, like I said, you giving me some definitely food for thought. Just one quick question before I get into the question I have here is there a lot of black members, and who is funding this Antifa movement?
Well, I think a lot of times whenever you're talking about funding, it is, at least I could tell you from the perspective of One People's Project, we get our donations, but a lot of it is out of pocket. And I think that's the case with a lot of the organizations out there. Some do have some grant money, but I don't think it's necessarily the folks that you see dressed in black that are getting the grant money. I think that there's other organizations out there that are able to get those kinds of donations, but funding really, for the most part, is grassroots. It's out of pocket. It's like basically it's like a community more or less helping each other out, helping each other, trying to get this thing going. I will tell you, what was the other question you had asked me? Not just funding, but how many black, what kind of, we have people, there are lots of people of color that are involved in the anti-fascist scene, but it's like what you said, you have a lot of us out there that are kind of like wary of the idea of white allies, and with good reason. I mean, some white allies turned out to be not all that friendly to us. I mean, Hillary Clinton's supposed to be an ally, and I bring that point up because every now and again she shows her true colors, her and her husband. What I will say is that, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come on the show, because I can't be the only brother out there, and I'm not. But there needs to be more of us out there taking the lead and speaking for ourselves and getting in the face of some of these knuckleheads out there. We saw what happened in Charlottesville to one brother, DeAndre Harris, and I know some of the folks that were involved in that. Some of them, and by the way, some of the folks on the white supremacist side, as per we were talking about the National Citizen and David Clark, they were Hispanic, they were Indian, they were Jewish, and so on. So they got a little bit of, they recognized that they need to basically have their own allies of color to get ahead. And we have to recognize that as well. We're not doing this. We can't do this by ourselves, but what we do have to do is take the lead. And we have to make sure that we define exactly who the enemy is and why they are the enemy. And it's important that more voices like ours do come out and definitely speak directly to these fascists out there and let them know that you are not going any further than this.
Thomas in New York, did you have another question?
Yeah, I do. What you just said was interesting, because when I look at the two different groups, and I say if I took white supremacy out of the equation and I had to choose one, it definitely wouldn't be the Antifa side. My question for you is, one of the antonyms for fascism is democracy. And under this system of democracy, we were chattel slaves. We had Jim Crow. We had the current prison slavery, which Scotty's an abolitionist. I mean, that was all under white supremacist democracy. As a member of Antifa, why not just be a counter-racist as opposed to a anti-fascist? And I'll mute my line.
I think I have an issue with fascism, because fascism gives you that too. I think maybe it's time for a new structure. Maybe it's time for something new that we haven't figured in yet. I think a lot of times we try to, and I always try to make this point because I come from an anarchist perspective sometimes often.
Well, I was just about to raise that point, Daryle, is that there seems to be a large contingent of anarchists who don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, any form of government. And shout out to my abolitionist comrade, Max Parthis. When I met him, he was like, dude, I'm an anarchist. Well, I was like, well, do you want to abolish slavery? He was like, yeah. Well, what's the problem? Let's work.
But my feeling is it depends on who you talk to. I mean, my attitude when it comes to being an anarchist is just simply saying, I do not recognize any authority that doesn't deserve to be recognized. That's
I can
where
get
I'm
down
at
with
on
that.
My thing is, we all have to have the right to self-determination, and we have to insist on it sometimes. And unfortunately, there's a lot of systems that are in place, a lot of political structures and ideals that does not provide for that. Anarchism has. And I think it's only a matter of asserting yourself when you actually see that come into play. I think it's more of a case of we as people of color, we as Black people have to assert ourselves more. I mean, we've done pretty good with doing so over the past at least 100 years, 150 years.
Yeah. But
I don't think folks have gotten the message that we want to control our own destiny. And that is what has to come into play. That is what we need to do. We need to assert ourselves to the point where if you cannot accept that, you will be removed, because you are not going to hurt us as we try to build ourselves up. That's always going to be an important thing. But I say do it in an anarchist perspective. I say the reason why I do it like that is because I also recognize the fact that we are not the only ones on this planet. And we always have to work in fellowship with everyone else. We don't always have to run into conflicts with people just because they're not of our tribe. And it's always been the hardest thing to do sometimes, but sometimes the hardest thing, not even sometimes, almost all the times, the hardest thing to do is probably going to be the most beneficial to all of us as a people.
Look, look, Daryle, you've been in the military. I've been in the military. Not that I went to West Point or anything like that, and I studied all these battle strategies. But, I mean, one of the common things in successful wars is that the victor always had allies, okay? And there also doesn't have to be, like, when somebody says my white ally, that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be out there arm in arm with a group in order to collaborate with them in any kind of anti-establishment, anti-fascist, any kind of anti-slavery action. Again, the extent of my support of Antifa is my media operations and being able to use my voice in these airwaves to say to people, hey, don't listen to Dinesh D'Souza. Don't listen to David Clark. Don't listen to Donald Trump. I don't see nothing wrong with these young white kids getting out there beating these damn terrorists bloody. Because, you know, what I would like to see happen is for them to bring back the Klan Act of 1871 and treat these terrorists just like Ulysses S. Grant was treating these terrorists. So in the absence of a legitimate government that takes all of our interests at heart and is practicing justice, liberty, and justice for all, then people need to step up. And in this regard, in this confrontational regard in meeting the terrorists in the streets, I see Antifa is the only one stepping up. And I applaud that and I support that. I'm not going to get out there with you now. I'm a little bit too old now. You know, I'm 50 years old now, but I am
I'm 49.
Yeah, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you fight your propaganda war because I believe in your cause. I believe your cause is just and what have you. So, I can say that I'm an ally of theirs without ever even talking or coordinating with them, just from my role as a journalist or a media personality. So there's different ways you can work with people is what I'm trying to say without actually working with people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I would also say that you have to also look at how the enemy responds to that to get an idea of what it is we must do. Right now, there's this whole thing about making Antifa a terrorist organization. Well, first of all, we're not an organization, so that would be problematic.
Right, exactly. You're not.
But they turn around, but that was the same thing they said about Black Lives Matter when that came into being. They wanted to make Black Lives Matter a terrorist organization. Again, not an organization. They also said the same thing about Occupy. So basically what they're saying is that they want to criminalize you for being anti-fascist and for believing that Black Lives Matter. And the fact of the matter is, if they are looking at it like that, if they are saying that these kinds of ideas and this way of thinking is a threat to them, then we just got to keep that pressure on and step it up a little bit. And we can't do that by ourselves, not in this war, not in this game. We got to step up with everybody. And once we do that, hey, I'll tell you straight up, I need to have white allies in war, but I also think that we can't be at war once the war is over, so we're going to have white allies in peace as well. We all got to be able to work together in fellowship. And it is really important for the betterment of all of us as a people. We're called One People's Project for a reason. We are one people. But by the same token, that does not work if we don't respect who we are as a people. And when I say we are, I mean whether you're Black or whether you're Hispanic or what have you. We all got to learn how to respect each other and more or less love each other and trust each other. Otherwise, we're going to have some problems. We're going to continue this vicious cycle. And I mean, that's me just being real. I don't want to make the same mistake that the Nazis are making right now. And that polarizes all of us. So I got to be careful with that.
Understood. Well, like I said, I won't be out there in the streets battling them terrorists, but I hope to be reporting on these airways of many more battles to come. Because again, I'm not trying to play games here. Somebody needs to do it. I take this very serious. These are terrorists. They have been killing people. And these particular terrorists, neo-confederate white supremacy that rose up after the Civil War, really bitter about Black Union troops being the deciding factor in whooping their ass. And then, they sprang up with these terrorist groups. And yes, President Grant did use the Klan Act of 1871 to pretty much destroy the Klan, but they were revived by later administrations, and we still dealing with them. And I say the Civil War never ended. The Confederacy did not lose, regardless of what people think, because slavery was never abolished. All right. And that by any means necessary, as Malcolm is so fond of saying, we got to end slavery. And this fascism and this racism, to me, those are just tools used to keep a system of slavery in place. And it's victimizing all of us, but let's keep it real. It's targeting some of us more than others. And I'm talking about primarily Black people. Our bodies have always historically been commodified in this country. But again, great work, Antifa. Keep battling them terrorists out there in the street. Mr. Jenkins, did you have any final thoughts for us as we get ready to wrap up this broadcast of BTR News on this Tuesday night?
Well, all I got to say is just I hope everybody can just check out our website. It's onepeoplesproject.com. We also have another website, and this is important to point out. It's called idavox.com. That's our news line. It's named after Ida B. Wells, one of our original crusaders with the pen. And just like One People's Project, she wrote about the things that no one else would. She suffered for it. They burned her out in Memphis. And but she continued on. She kept on, and that's what we got to do. It's not over. This fight is not over.
Yeah.
And to those who are wondering when it is, we'll let you know.
All right, Daryle. Well, again, man, keep up the great work that you've been doing through these years. 2 decades of work out there since you came out the military, deciding that you want to work on behalf of the people. And from what I have observed since in the short time that I've known you, you've been doing some great work. So peace to you. And just stay safe behind these enemy lines as much as possible.
Thank you. Peace be unto you, everyone. Thank you.
All right. That was Mr. Daryle Jenkins of One People's Project. And again, he was just informing us about what he knows about the movement, and he's been out there for 30 years. So again, we have to be careful about the information that is presented to us, especially if it's coming from the corporate media. But you know, the alt-right has long had its own media as well. And so just in the interest of getting more information, are these friends or foes? Is the enemy of my enemy my friend? Is this, after these two get through battling each other, am I going to have to take you on? So just in the information of opening up lines of communication. But I would say, even though I'm encouraging these young white kids to keep doing what they doing, in the meantime, black people need to be arming up. You need to be preparing like we live in a war zone, because we do. It's serious out there. And one of the great things about the election of Donald J. Trump is that now it's out in the open. It's just right there in your face, blatantly in your face, no denial. And all these people talking about, oh, he taking on the deep state and all this and that. No. He part of the system. He been part of the system. And he's made it abundantly clear that he is an adherent to the religion of white supremacy. And he is not acting like a person who believes in justice. He is certainly not acting like a person who believes in freedom and liberty for all. And he is openly encouraging and coddling these terrorists. And so what are we going to do? We need to be prepared. We need to be getting to the gun range as much as possible. We need to be training our young ones up, okay, in the safe use of firearms. Just start taking what we're seeing out here serious. Take it seriously. And not just from a defensive posture, but see where you can jump in an offensive posture, because definitely the abolitionist movement, we on offense. We ain't playing defense. We on offense. And by any means necessary. Whatever we got to do to end slavery in this country, we're serious about that, and we are committed. All right, so I want to thank our guest, Daryle Lamont Jenkins of One People's Project, for joining us tonight. I want to thank our callers for asking the questions that they asked so that we could get their perspective. And you know, we need to ask questions. Asking questions is good. The only stupid question is the one you don't ask, even if we don't agree on the certain thing, on certain issues. As long as we agree that slavery was never abolished and these evil people are practicing a race-based slavery and practicing white supremacy and injustice against the people, then, and you want to do something about it, then hey, I'm good with you. You know, get in where you fit in. I'll fight on this front, you fight on that front. We ain't got to fight each other. Focus your resources on the enemy. If we don't agree on a certain tactic, well, then you work on that tactic over there. I work on this tactic over here, and hopefully we'll meet behind enemy lines as we put the enemy in the ground. All right, this has been Scotty Reid. Check out our afternoon music mix from noon to 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Black Talk Radio, the premier Black digital radio station providing you with independent Black media. You could donate to our nonprofit, Black Talk Media Project. Visit us there, blacktalkmediaproject.org, and become a member of BTR community. Again, just $24 a year. That breaks down to what, about 50 cents a week to participate in a social media with a purpose. And what is our purpose? But to acquire funds so that we can engage in activities that we need to collectively engage in. And that cannot happen unless enough of us come together. We don't need all of us. Some of us ain't got nothing to contribute, but those who do, that's one way you can contribute to our movement, is by taking out a yearly subscription to BTR Community. With that said, recognize the fact that you live behind enemy lines, that they still practicing slavery, and we need to be gearing up and preparing for an end of slavery. We can't sit around waiting on other people to save us, although we may appreciate any efforts on behalf of liberty and justice for all, but we cannot rely on others to bring us freedom and liberty. That's something we got to give for ourselves. All right, peace and blessings to all. Be safe.